All right, welcome everybody to Rxperience, ASCP's podcast. I'm your host, Chad, alongside my co-host, Tom, and it is President's Day. So we have our current presidents on for President's Day episode. Rob Loeffler is your current president, and Jessica Androff is your president-elect. So welcome to the show. I know both of you have been on previously for when you were here for the retreat, but welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
For people that note things like this, and I can remember now a little bit more easily because we gave Deborah Melito a Pittsburgh Steeler jersey, probably the hardest thing I ever had to purchase on my own.
Did you get one for yourself too?
No, I did not. But we got her the number 53 because she was the 53rd president of ASCP. So she had a good, solid defensive number for her Steeler jersey. But that makes Rob Loeffler president number 55 and Jessica Androff president number 56. So there you go. Those are your numbers.
Pharmacists count by 5. I feel like that's a good number, Rob.
It is a good number. Double nickel.
And we just did the ASCP birthday episode, so ASCP is officially 57 years old. So it kind of aligns and makes sense. The first few years of the organization, we didn't have a traditional president like we have today. It was started, Rick Berman was one of the early, executive directors who served basically in both roles until the organization got its organizational structure behind it. That's why you guys are 55 and 56. So expect some sort of paraphernalia with those numbers on it at some point.
Also Steeler jerseys.
Not Steeler jerseys, I promise.
No, come on.
But you might get, Jessica's from Minnesota, maybe a Vikings jersey. Rob, I don't know. Did we talk about your allegiance to football? Colts?
Our allegiance to basketball.
But
maybe
maybe an Ohio State jersey. There you go.
Yeah, Ohio State would work. Don't give me a Butler University jersey for football.
Well, so it's America 250 this year also, which I think is fun. Without any sort of thought, our meeting is in National Harbor, Maryland, which is basically Washington, D.C. So, our meeting in late October will coincide with this area's celebration of America 250, which has already started. If you watched any of the news or the New Year's Eve celebrations here in DC, they have a video that they play on the Washington Monument. So it serves as sort of a screen on all four sides of the story of the United States, which I thought was pretty cool. I get into that kind of stuff here. So I'm excited about America 250 and the celebrations that'll go on in this area. But that coincides with our President's Day celebration. We're going to have a parade here in Old Town Alexandria like we do every year for President's Day. So you guys are presidents during a historic year of celebrating the United States. I guess my first question to each of you is, where do you put our profession, let's call it long-term care pharmacists and pharmacies, where do you put us in historical context this particular year?
This is a big year for us. And we're just, we're recording in early January. And so we're just on the edge of figuring out what IRA is going to mean to us. I mean, I think that's huge in long-term care. And I think a lot of people think, well, that really affects operations. But it's more than just operations. It affects all of us in long-term care because they're not getting the drugs, or the reimbursement is so broken. I think that's one of the biggest things that's happened in long-term care in recent memory.
I would agree.
Talking about historical.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. In fact, there are times I think when you look back on your life or your career or things, and certainly I'm not at the point where I'm looking backwards, I'm still looking a lot forward, but you have really pivotal moments that you remember what and where you were and what you were doing and what it felt like. Certainly that's the case in skilled nursing as they've experienced reimbursement changes where kind of the world stops for a minute. And definitely, I think we're there right now with long-term care. I mean, the Part D entree was certainly one of those that really changed the landscape for us. You know, COVID was probably another one in a different way. I was chatting with our CEO, Phil Fogg, last week, and just talking, you know, at the beginning of the new year, how thankful I am to be on the Consanas team and, you know, have great leaders to look up to and have a great team to work with. And he commented that he can't recall a time when a leader has had so many challenges facing them and so many uncertainties. And I think that's certainly true for me and my peers right now, that there's a lot of unknowns. I think one thing I've been saying for probably a month or so is at least, you know, come the end of January, we'll have a little bit more certainty. Doesn't mean it's good certainty or bad certainty. It just means we're going to know what the landscape is a little bit more. As I speak, I've been in contact with our team since the early morning hours of January 1st. 2025 went all the way to the finish line and then some from a work perspective. And we have a lot of things that we don't understand why they're happening right now. And we've got definitely some challenges with IRA implementation, in addition to the regular beginning of the year things. And, you know, I like I said, I agree with Rob. This is just this is going to be one of those times that we look back, if the podcast is still here in 20 years, in some form, and we're going to look back and say, you remember when our reimbursement changed significantly in 2026, and how did we survive through it? But hopefully, how did we thrive?
Yeah, it's funny. Tom asked a question on our birthday show about significant events from ASCP's perspective, at least from my perspective on ASCP. And, you know, I talked about OBRA 87 and establishing the role of a consultant pharmacist, and not just the regulatory and clinical role, but the overseer of pharmacy in a nursing home role. That role was all codified in 1987. Obviously a big deal for this industry. The other thing I said was just the way we responded during COVID as a sector that had not generally vaccinated prior and stood up and filled a void that needed to be filled. Whether, you know, whatever your feelings are about the COVID pandemic, pharmacists ran into that burning building at that time, and we should be proud of that. And I do agree. I think this year, this whole sort of crucible of reimbursement is coming to a head for all pharmacy, certainly because we're focused so much on the Medicare population. It's so much more profound to what we do in our settings in long-term care pharmacy. And to Rob's point, it's not just about paying for that prescription and getting the right reimbursement. That revenue supports all of these other activities and services that we provide to older adults. And it comes at a time when older adults are only increasingly more complex, and there's an increasingly larger number of them. So these things can't all survive. I tend to be a little bit more positive and think that that's going to result in some wins for our industry. But that's, you know, speculative and hopeful. But I do think it's forcing the conversation that you can't say that you want to take care of people as they age, make sure they get the right medications and treatment and management, and also not pay appropriately for it.
Right. And add any value added additional services. I mean, most of our services throughout the last 20 years, we've just done free and didn't charge and those type of things. And of course, that's caught up to us a little bit. But, you know, one thing, I mean, we're all about the same age. We've been in this industry for, 20 something years. Jess started when she was 8, but the rest of us are, but one thing that is 100% true is we're resilient. I mean, at the end of the day, obviously, Y2K, but, there was issues that affected everybody, but specifically for long-term care, Medicare Part D was, it feels so much like that. It was a bunch of uncertainty. don't know exactly how it's going to fall. The government threw it in place before they really had any structure. And, it didn't take 3 months. It took more like a year for everything to kind of get normalized a little bit. But reimbursement was affected. And, pharmacy I was running had a 25% profit margin off of Medicaid. I mean, we were just rolling, in good financial prosperity. And of course that changed, affected, but we also altered and affected, and not just survived, but thrived. And with COVID, same type of thing that seemed to come out of nowhere. And we resiliently in long-term care stepped up, like you said, Chad, and we ran into the firing, the building that was on fire, and are better off, I think, for it. And what makes this a little different for me is it's not just a one thing happening in the beginning of 2026. This is supposed to happen every year indefinitely. And then you throw in Trump's, most favored nation comments and those type of things. And it's just like, is there going to be an end? The Medicare Part D certainly felt like there was going to be an end. COVID, we all assumed that was going to come to an end. But, with this is what makes it a little more auspicious and scary is the fact that it doesn't feel like there could be an end to it.
Yeah. I mean, sure. I think even with the generic cliff, for those of us that were around during that, we knew there was a finite number of drugs that were going to have a significant impact. And then it was going to be, happy trails going forward. Of course, in hindsight, I think as we look at it, we've seen diminishing reimbursement year over year as a sector. And so I think that's why the IRA and the, 2027 drugs, Part B drugs going forward, I think that's why it's so impactful, because we don't have high water anymore. The stumps are showing everywhere. And I keep saying that high water hides a lot of stumps. And as a sector, when we had better margins, I think you could operate less efficiently. I think you could, execute less efficiently. I think you could do a lot of things less efficiently. And now we're digging for pennies in the couch cushions, essentially, to be able to make it work with what we've got ahead of us. I am a little bit of an optimist, and Chad and I have talked about this before as well. I think you have very few chances to change your revenue model as a business, and this is a chance just looking us right in the face.
Yeah, I think it's easy to get beat up by all the negativity, as Tom described, all the different, not just IRA, it's IRA plus the foreign drug pricing, it's the Trump Rx card, it's Mark Cuban's cost plus plan, it's commercial insurance. And it's easy to get deflated, but at the same time, seeing the little glimmers of hope in all of those little processes, Mark Cuban's plan pays an appropriate dispensing fee to a community pharmacy. That's a win. We've seen some of these plans that are working in long-term care pay, close to what we think an appropriate dispensing fee is for long-term care. That's a glimmer of hope. And I think to your point, Jessica, it's trying to bring those forward and make sure that everybody sees that, and everybody sees, hey, we've really taken what was never really intended. The pharmacy should never make money on a handful of drugs and lose money on the vast majority of their drugs as a way to sustain their business. And let's reimburse appropriately. You do the same job for a $2 generic that you do for a $1,500 medication when it comes to management and drug interaction checks and safety. You should get the same amount for doing that work. And we might not ever get away purely from some sort of price cost-based margin being supportive to some degree, but I think the vast majority of that needs to go away, and we need to be focused on getting paid for the services that are provided. And those services not just being one single dispensing fee, but the differentiated services that are provided for patients in certain settings. So delivery if you're delivering, medication regimen review if you're over 65. All those services need a fair way of being reimbursed, in addition to that function of dispensing that product and all that goes into that. And I, again, overly positive, but it feels like we're reaching a point where people are recognizing, hey, yeah, we're gonna kill these guys if we don't, make sure the model works.
Mm-hmm.
And if we kill them, who's going to do it?
Right.
Right.
That's the other thing is who's left to do it when you put them all under.
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of, Chad, your post on LinkedIn, aptly timed on December 31st. I was thinking about it, and people always talk about the post office. The post office delivers through rain, sleet, snow, everything. And I'm like, but they don't deliver on holidays, and they're not there at midnight taking a hospice order and making sure it's getting there. And then when you draw a comparison to other medical providers and the services they provide, with very few exceptions, urgent care and emergency room being one, and hospitals being one of them, other medical providers are not open on holidays. They're not providing services in the middle of the night as a routine part of doing business. And whether you're talking about long-term care pharmacies, which certainly all of us are having to provide, that at least the ones that serve skilled nursing facilities, we have to have some way to provide urgent medical, prescription services, et cetera, in the middle of the night on a holiday. But even retail pharmacies, to some extent, are still open and staffed on, holidays. And we're the only medical provider that is sitting there at 12:01 a.m.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I definitely didn't want to lose that on the broad audience that this thing started at 12:01 on New Year's Day. Like, it's not the 5th, it's not, a week later. The first claim got adjudicated at 12:01 somewhere. And yeah, millions of claims didn't happen until probably the next day and into the weekend. But this happened then. And we can't forget that piece of it. This isn't like other disciplines, to your point, Jessica, where, we're just closed till Monday and then we open and see what this is really about. This is happening in real time.
To both of your guys' points, it seems like the system, we've always talked about wanting to be recognized, but it seems like the system has never caught up to the value of pharmacists, the value that pharmacists actually have. And, and we've always, tried to fight to be recognized, but I think it's time that we start fighting to be more utilized and, not just recognize what the value that we bring, but to also start utilizing our talents in multiple different areas. And I think, again, when you look at pharmacists as a whole, long-term care pharmacists have a unique opportunity to start being utilized in multiple different ways across the board, because seniors are going to live in multiple different areas outside of nursing homes, and there's going to be tens of millions of more of them that need to utilize pharmacists, long-term care pharmacists.
For sure. There's been some, there's some friction. We've been doing this age-friendly pharmacist and age-friendly pharmacy recognition, and there's been some friction about, well, age-friendly pharmacy, you say they have to be available 24/7. They have to do these criteria that really came from Medicare in terms of servicing a nursing home, and you're kind of tying that to being age-friendly. And there's some resistance on our part to say, like, if you're going to service somebody's loved one and they're going to be on a regimen of medications, to varying complexities, and they need to call you at 11 o'clock at night, they need to be able to talk to somebody. You can't just be closed until 9 a.m. the next morning. Now, you don't physically have to be on call 24/7, but you have to have a process. How do I get a hold? And our long-term care pharmacies are used to that because they've had to do that for decades servicing nursing homes. But if you're going to be age-friendly and you're going to provide those services, you have to do those things that are age-friendly, and that's part of it. And that's what our pharmacies have always done, and to everybody's point, not always been recognized.
Well, and Chad, to parlay the age-friendly movement into LTC pharmacy at home, why wouldn't we want to distinguish ourselves from retail pharmacy? Because that creates a revenue model that's sustainable, that allows us to actually serve patients at home and all the delivery costs and additional costs that go along with that. And to your point, it doesn't have to be, Jess sitting by the phone waiting for the phone to ring, but you have to have a process, and there's lots of ways to do that. So I don't. Maybe I'm being a little bit naive compared to other pharmacies that might not understand our model, but I don't think it's a heavy lift to put something together to operationalize that.
No, and I think you have to remember, I think people get so concentrated on the competition part of it and the who's going to win and lose part of it that they miss the forest for the trees, which is you have a 75 million person population over the age of 65. There are going to be plenty of low complexity people over the age of 65 that will continue to use community pharmacy services, and they will do a great job. And there are going to be very complex people over the age of 65 that don't want to live in a nursing home, that don't have the ability to go to an assisted living, that are going to need advanced services at home that really long-term care pharmacies are already capable of providing. We talk about it in terms of service levels so that we're clear that we're not picking a long-term care pharmacy over a community pharmacy. We're just saying you have to do these services. If as a community pharmacy you want to do those services, do it. Figure it out. I keep referencing this birthday call or this birthday podcast, but I don't think it's crazy to think that some community pharmacies and some long-term care pharmacies might not, come up with a relationship that says, hey, when you get a discharge from a nursing home of a, relatively low complexity patient, discharge them to me in the community. I'll take care of them. And when I have a patient that suddenly needs an IV medication that I can't provide, I'll come to you and have you help service that. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think that's what'll happen. But I think at face value, people get very turf oriented about, oh, you just want to take over and service all the old patients. Well, that's not the reality. There's plenty of pie out there for everybody.
Yeah.
And it's growing.
Yeah, for sure.
So Rob, those are the problems. I'm assuming you're gonna have a plan to us by Tuesday as president.
I think it's already up on the website.
It's already on the website. He's going to have to rewrite it now because of that. No, okay.
I just have one suggestion for you. I think that Trump amply named a Secretary of War. I think you should find a Secretary of War to go to war and get these things resolved.
A Secretary of Reimbursement War? I like that.
Secretary of Reimbursement War. That's just a suggestion.
That's pretty good.
I'm furiously writing notes for my leadership plan.
So, in all seriousness, Rob, it is a lot going on, a lot to Chicken Little about, but a lot of serious issues. And you've been with ASCP for a while, and for some reason you volunteered to say put me in charge this year. But what's your thoughts? What do you think that we need to do grassroots as far as the ASCP community?
There's a lot. I mean, provider status would be a big one. We keep talking about reimbursement, and that provider status, being able to bill for some of those services would be enormous. And we've been talking about it for a while, right? I mean, it's not some brand new exciting idea that nobody's thought of before. It's been levied around, and I think that's a big opportunity. Will it come this year? I think right now there's so many eyes on IRA and making sure that we can keep the lights on and keep the drugs flowing out the door into the facilities, that there's that piece of it. In addition to that provider status, even just, I think continuing to move towards billing facilities for the services that they're receiving at a fair rate. For so long, we're not giving away consulting, but nobody's breaking even on consulting that I'm aware of. I mean, maybe a few independent people, and I'm excited for them. But a lot of the long-term care pharmacies are throwing in consulting and billing for it, but it's break even or, pretty around close to that. And the facilities oftentimes the reimbursement for them is so poor that they're not wanting to pay for extra services that we could provide and provide a lot of value for, but we can't just give it away either. So
I'll tell
that on the table too.
I'll tell a story from my wife. She's gonna not like me for this, but she does a consulting for an AL in Virginia, and in Virginia, it's 6 months that you have to go in and do consulting. And the nursing director of this particular AL was like, I don't know why you come in every 6 months. I mean, this really does nothing. Like, we're a high quality facility. Like, we need this kind of work, but you're only coming in twice a year. My wife's like, well, that's all your company is willing to pay. They cut it back from what it was when it was when she was doing it for a different pharmacy. And it's just the reality is like, there are groups out there that recognize the value, but they're not willing to reimburse appropriately. That's a different kind of reimbursement, but.
And I think, to that point, we provide so much in terms of quality of life, but it's hard to put a dollar amount on that.
Yeah.
How many readmissions did you prevent? How many falls did you prevent? What was the savings to that facility? And are they willing to, reinvest that money into some of those types of services?
I do think about that a lot too. And I put it in the same vein as going to a restaurant because it's farm to table or buying organic food. People will pay for what they perceive to be value. We've got to get over that hump in what we do as pharmacists, that the loved one of the person that we're servicing is like, no, I get it. I'm going to have to pay a little bit more, but it's like buying organic eggs. Like, I'm going to do it because it's healthier. And we have to get there because to your point, having this unending argument about whether or not what we're doing is valuable seems like pushing the rock up the hill. Like, this is insanity. And the garden variety person would say, hey, if I sat down and talked to your mom or dad about their medications and gave them some tips on how it could be easier and maybe safer and maybe get them off the wrong drugs and on the right drugs, everybody's going to say, yeah, I want you to do that. Now, when you get to will you pay for it, you might run into some challenges, but I think by and large, people get it. And I think that's helping this whole conversation for reimbursement as a whole.
Yeah. And we have facilities that don't have to have consulting in assisted living that are having us do.
Sure.
Well, we have a customer that went from quarterly to every other month consulting for assisted living in states that there's no regulation. Oh. And so there are people that do get
100%
it for as many people that don't.
For sure.
Yeah, I think it's showing your value. Like, we've not been great at that as a profession about showing our value, but I think more and more we're getting better at it. And I think there's been a little bit of a shift. We're one of the only countries in the world that has commoditized healthcare so much that we've diminished the value for the most valuable people of our population who have contributed the most, you could arguably say, and most other countries put so much value on their elderly and making sure that they're taken care of. And for years, we didn't do a very good job at that. But I think long-term care pharmacy is doing a better job probably than the broader population of showing the value of taking care of these people that are at their most fragile.
Absolutely. 100%.
So just back to my grassroots question, what do you think that we as ASCP and the members of ASCP most important to focus on, other than, again, worrying about reimbursement, but to try to move that pendulum, move that needle a little bit? What do you think that you'd like to see the members do?
Yeah, I think we've done a really good job in the last, I would say probably 5 years in the sector versus the previous, however many, at least as 15 plus that I can remember, at really collaborating a lot more. doesn't matter what we do or where we do it, but recognizing the value of what each of us do individually and realizing that a rising tide lifts all boats. And, I've always been a really big fan of collaboration. Tom and I have known each other for a really long time. And in the very early days of us switching to the same software system, he was on a call and members of his team with me and other pharmacies around the US talking about challenges and how did we solve for workflow challenges within the software. So from my perspective, collaboration is the way that we move the needle. And I think getting all of us loud when there are issues is we've got a strong membership. And if we use our voice, we could collectively do a lot better. And if we look at outside of the ASCP membership at the broader sector, there are lots of opportunities to continue to engage the profession to get, on the same page with what the professional societies are doing. But, you talk about provider status, Rob, and I don't know if this is the year. I actually, and Chad and I were talking about this, I don't know, in late ensuing hours of 2025, probably, that the IRA actually might provide a window for things that we've been struggling to do for a really long time, because it's providing an opening to have a conversation about, okay, the $30 supply fee, we can't do that, but what can we do? That's maybe not going to cost, I guess visually cost us as much money, or, really get people's ire up about $30 a script. It could be provider status. It could be the long-term care pharmacy definition. There could be a lot of things that the IRA provides an entree for us to have that conversation on a deeper level and to get some movement on areas where we felt we were previously in a stalemate. But what that is going to take is for our membership to be engaged and vocal. So, Rob and I both work for long-term care pharmacies that provide prescription dispensing and clinical services, but others that are on the board, others that are past, presidents, others that are in our membership work in all different areas of long-term care pharmacy. But to our earlier point, we're all interconnected. If there's no drug being dispensed to a patient, there are no clinical services that can be provided. And so we're all a part of the cog. And I get less worried about, Chad, you mentioned something about people worried about competing against each other. I'm kind of done with that.
Yeah.
We've painted ourselves into a corner as a profession because we were so worried about competing. And, I don't want to tell my secret sauce to Rob because then he's going to do better than me. And again, a rising tide lifts all boats. Like if we all can do better, we're all going to do better. So let's figure out a way to do that.
I think that's well said. Your two little analogies, rising tide and the
stumps in the water.
Stumps in the water, like straight from Minnesota, Land O'Lakes.
Yes. Yes.
And being winter, you think she'd talk about, taking the right sledding path or, their
ice fishing.
Reindeer.
Well, stumps can be very problematic there too.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we're all on the same page, and it's my goal for 2026 again is not to survive it, but to make a clear impact. Seniors are recognized in almost every other type of setting. We've separated seniors with Medicare. We've separated people with disability with Medicare. We've separated that when it comes to how they get treated in the hospital and how they get treated in personal care. It's like pharmacy is the only area where seniors really haven't been separated, and whether they live at home or they live inside of an institutional setting. And I think this is again trying to look at the silver lining. I want to take what's going on with IRA or what's going on with the growing population and use that as a foundational platform to say there is a separation of church and state here. There's a separation. It's seniors and what they need. And it's certainly if they're a very active, mobile 65-year-old and they don't need, any kind of extra help. But man, when they start turning 80 and they got 3 comorbidities and they're on 15 medications, you've got to do something else. And I believe that continual voice and ASCP and Rxperience and these type of forums and podcasts are really what to continue utilizing to create awareness.
100%. All right, guys. Any last words from the presidents as we embark here in 2026?
We're taking nominees for Secretary of War Reimbursement.
Yes.
So send it to Chad Seawers at ASCP.
There you go.
Send your nomination.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a little bit of a bumpy ride for the next. I mean, even by the time this podcast airs, I don't think we'll really know the landscape in LTC, but I do think this is really an opportunity to thrive, and we just have to find the path.
I'll throw one plug in, recognizing that this will air somewhere in the vicinity of President's Day, but our annual fly-in to come to DC and visit with Congress is going to be the end of February. So it probably either be the week of this broadcast or the week after this broadcast. But if you have the wherewithal to get here and be part of that, it is impactful. And it's all of these issues we've been talking about, only it's peppering the people of Congress with what needs to happen for pharmacy to do its job as effectively as possible.
Yeah. Dress warm and wear comfortable shoes.
There you go.
And I would add to that, just because there's so many people that haven't done it because they find it intimidating, to go to the Hill and talk to your senators and your congressmen. And ASCP does such a good job of setting you up for success and making it a comfortable and valuable and rewarding experience. So don't be intimidated.
Yeah. And
take the plunge.
With that, nobody goes alone, and you're usually going with other people that are in the same business that you're in. So to Jessica's point prior about collaboration, you're in there making arguments as a sector, not as a pharmacy, but as a whole unit. And I think that's makes it valuable, and it also takes that intimidation factor away from it.
Meeting with your state representatives too,
yeah.
Not just some state, but your state.
You're right. No, you're a specific person. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for listening and watching our experience, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Jessica. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.